All right. So I would love to introduce you guys to all of our panelists that have joined us here today. I'm going to be your host tonight. My name is Grain, and I am a marketing and e-commerce coordinator for Lovers and a sexual wellness expert. All right. Hi, why don't you kick us off?
Oh, did you say me? I'm sorry. My name is Ty Lerman. I am a licensed professional counselor in Houston. I'm a certified sex therapist, and I am almost done. I'm ABD complete with my PhD in clinical sexology. I'm in private practice. I largely work with the LGBT community, and as well as people with alternative relationships, all sex kind of things. So polyamory and kinky relationships is kind of my forte.
Awesome. How about you, Evian?
Hi, y'all. My name is Evian Whitney. I am from Los Angeles, California. I am a sexuality doula and a sex educator. And my specialty these days has been really getting into somatics, embodiment, and sensuality. So I'm excited to chat from that perspective as well.
Awesome, thanks for sharing. Stella.
Hey everyone, I'm Stella Harris. I'm based in Portland, Oregon. I'm a certified intimacy educator and sex coach. I also do a lot with open relationships, folks exploring kink, a lot to do with people working on communication in their relationships. I'm also a certified mediator, written a couple of books, Tongue-Tied, Untangling Communication in Sex, Kink, and Relationships, and just out this year, The Ultimate Guide to Threesomes.
Oh, great. I've heard great things about that book too, I will say. And Shadeen.
Hi, everybody. My name is Shadeen Francis. I'm your resident Canadian for the evening. I feel like every space is meant to have a designated Canadian, so I will be that for you tonight. I am calling you, though, from Philadelphia, where I now live and practice. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. I am a board-certified sex therapist. I'm a graduate professor, and actually, very similarly to Ty, it sounds like we have some community overlap. I work a lot with kinky polyqueer, sort of creative alternative weirdos by definition. And my work really centers our opportunity for living lives full of peace and pleasure. So my clinical practice really centers in connecting people, one, to themselves more deeply, but also really thinking about how the larger landscape of social justice impacts the way that we live and move and feel in our bodies.
Incredible. So I think you guys can see already that we have a really, really great panel set up for you guys tonight, and they're all coming from very different spaces. Even if there is a little bit of overlap, I think we're going to have some really great perspective on how to introduce sex toys to a partner. So before we get started, I would love to give you guys a little bit of context about the inspiration behind this workshop. When it comes to introducing sex toys to a partner, this is one of the most common questions that we receive in stores. It's one of the most common questions I receive on our social media Q&As. And I'm sure that every single panelist here has also received this question at some point and has had to answer it. And so one of the things that I think that goes to show is that there are so many reasons and complexities behind why it can be challenging to introduce sex toys into a relationship. And so I would like to kind of kick off tonight's workshop with talking a little bit about what some of those reasons are. From our panelists, what do you think is some of the most common reasons for being reluctant to bring sex toys into a relationship or talk about sex toys for the first time?
I hear from a lot of coaching clients that they're afraid if they bring up sex toys that their partner will think it's sort of an insult to their sexual skill set, that it means something is wrong with the sex they're having already, that people will sort of compare themselves to the sex toy, anything from, size to stamina to ability. And I hear that about even just general asking for different kinds of sex. People are very worried about hurting a partner's feelings or introducing any conflict.
Yeah, I think that is something that we hear all the time about toys being a replacement to a person, which I would love to debunk in a second, but I want to hear a few more reasons why this is super challenging.
Yeah, I would add that a lot of it roots to our emotional experiences of shame. I think a lot of us carry lots of different kinds of shame around our bodies, around our desires, around our curiosities, around our communication, and even how we ask for things or name things. And so I often encounter that as a really visceral barrier, right? That is often the emotional experience that comes up for folks as they're saying, I'm having a hard time, even with the idea of introducing this, right? That we have internalized shaming messages from all sorts of places that then keep us from feeling like I can really navigate my sex life in the ways that maybe might feel really good to me.
I think a piece that ties in with shame is just our societal suppression of actual pleasure from sex, and I think that this is a big piece of that. Everyone is on a spectrum from the most traditional missionary only kind of very vanilla, and then we go all the way to the extreme, and we've alluded to some kinky stuff, and for some people toys are very kinky. Like if they're used to a very traditional, especially if there's a spiritual connection and there's faith that prevents them from there's barriers there from exploring certain things, and their own just personal cultures that they're involved in. This is a big barrier for that, and there's a piece of this being kink shame. When we say that, those of us in the sex world, and this doesn't feel like very kinky, but for many people it is, and so that's where a lot of this comes from. Is that internalized shame? Is what does it mean about me? What is my value now if I engage in these types of behaviors?
Yeah, I would add to everything that y'all are saying by adding that I think that aspect of shame also comes from this feeling that you're not allowed to bring sex toys into your relationship, that there's something wrong with you, or there's something wrong with the sex that you're having, or that it doesn't count as a sex act or a sex act with your partner, that the partnered sex is supposed to be partnered sex, and the solo sex is what is supposed to incorporate some type of sex toy. I think there's like this sort of like purist idea that we've all kind of, I don't know if we've subscribed to it, but I think we've all sort of been indoctrinated to believe that sex should be very clean and pure, like without any apparatus or anything. And that's like, those are the people that, or the people that have that kind of sex are somehow better or doing something right. So I've heard that a lot from clients in the past, that they didn't think that they were allowed to even bring a sex toy into their relationship, because they didn't think that that was something that was good to do or on the table for them to explore.
Totally. And I think that makes sense that we all feel this way, because a lot of the things that we come in contact with in the outside world tells us to feel that way, right? So we've identified some really, specific types of examples of things that people might struggle with when it comes to introducing a sex toy. And I think, one of the things we were talking about earlier is it is so different and so personal for each person. We touched a little bit on religion, we touched a little bit on personal boundaries and on shame and things like that. So what does this conversation sound like? Because it isn't a cookie cutter conversation, right? It has to be different for each of these different situations. So I would love for each of you that had brought up a different point to kind of talk about what you recommend for somebody that's in that position. Starting with you, Stella, you kind of talked a little bit about the idea of toys being a replacement to a partner.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for some folks, it can really help if they go on a shopping trip together, whether it's in person or online. And if the toy ends up being something brand new that they can choose together, rather than bringing something in that somebody already uses alone. So that turning it into a sexy date adventure, the picking of something and picking something that is meant for couples. I have I could rant forever about the idea of what's a couple's toy. I think everything is a couple's toy if you use it with a partner. But I know that there are some things that can feel more like an entry level first time you try something with another person that can feel more collaborative. And that's maybe a nice entry level toy. So making it collaborative, doing something together, letting maybe the person who is more shy or more unsure have a lot of agency in deciding what's going to be brought in and seeing how that could be fun for them. Also, there's erotica written specifically about sex toys. So sometimes finding an outside source for like, what could this even look like? We'll read some stories about people incorporating sex toys, or if you're comfortable with visual porn, like watch porn about sex toys and sort of get ideas about, look how hot this could be. And getting those ideas, sometimes it's easier if it's, I saw this thing over here rather than I have this fantasy. So sometimes that can feel a little less stressful.
Totally. I love how you talk about language and kind of shifting the language to be a little bit more accommodating to a partner, because that is something that we frequently recommend when somebody comes in the store and says, I want a sex toy, but I don't know how my partner is going to feel about it. We ask them to come back in with their partner. So that way it can be a collaborative experience. And I think that sometimes when you have that kind of shame or that feeling of a toy being a replacement, it's not so much about asking, it's about how you ask and making that person feel involved and feel, a part of it. So yeah, I think that's an incredibly great suggestion, Stella. Thank you for sharing that. I think like Shadeen, you were talking a little bit next, weren't you?
I sure can. Yeah, I often want to just like remind folks of like the agency and the skills that they currently have. Like, yes, I always want us to, feel empowered to like learn more things. But there is also a way in which we don't have to complicate it, right? Think about the way that you would share your favorite food or a movie or a show that you really like, right? That we have some precedent for saying like, I like something and I really hope that you might like it too. Would you like to experience it with me? Right? Or you don't have to actually watch this show with me, but I want to tell you about it. And here's some of why I like it. And I think you might also like it. Or I don't know if you're going to like it, but I just want you to know that this represents something that I'm interested in. And maybe you might get some insight about me because you've seen this, you've gone here, you tasted that. Right? I think we have all done that at some point in time. And so I just want us to sort of bookmark, when were the times where I felt really confident in doing that? When were what kinds of responses was I hoping for? And how can I maybe let my partner know, like, hey, or partners know, right? Like, I'm going to share something with you and I'm feeling, a little bit nervous about sharing it with you. And I really hope you like it, but no pressure. Or I would love to get these kinds of responses, right? We have done some of these exchanges before. And we've done them from very early, right? Inviting other kids to play with you, right? And how vulnerable that can feel, right? And so, yes, we might have some tenderness around how that did or didn't go in the past, but I just want to invite just a little bit of that memory and that agency that, oh, okay, I have my own language for this. I don't speak the way everyone else speaks. So I don't want to necessarily give you the template, although sometimes having a little bit can be helpful. But again, just remembering that, oh, I have done this. I know how to do this.
Yeah, I love that too, because I think that when you talk about like simplifying the conversation, it is, again, kind of a different way that you can approach, changing the language to accommodate someone. And in this case, I think that someone is you, the person having the conversation. And so I think that's a really incredible suggestion that I actually have never thought of before. So thank you for sharing that. Hi, you talked a little bit about like some specifics of like kink shaming and religion and personal boundaries that might prevent people from being able to explore this with that same autonomy. How do you kind of guide your clients in these types of situations?
Yeah, our sexuality is such a big part of who most of us are, right? And unless of those of us on the grayscale, those are the exception, but that's a very small percentage of our population. We are sexual beings. And I think it's really important to be able to get comfortable with being able to share with our partners this part of who we are. And I talk a lot about just normalizing being able to talk about this. I love what Shadeen was saying about referencing back that the fact that we've done this in other parts of our lives, and our sex life shouldn't be any different. There's no reason why this needs to be a place of shame where we need to hold this back. I frequently talk about using the analogy of like ordering a pizza with your partner, right? It's like, what are you in the mood for? Are we doing hand toss? Are we doing pepperoni? Are we doing our regular? Are we just doing our default? Or we want to do something slightly different and we want to shake it up a little bit? And that might be a sex toy in the bedroom, right? That might be introducing that. It's like, I'm tired of the same thing. Let's do something different. And this is getting a little monotonous for me. Or tried and true works for me. This works really well, and I want to continue that. And using that sort of analogy, like I want to be able to talk about sex the same way I talk about pizza, right? And this is what I really like, or this is what I don't really like, or there better not be olives on my pizza ever, ever. And just normalizing that and getting to a place where our partners and we can talk about this very casually, because it should be something that's casual in our lives with our partners. Pardon the should, but I love, that's my fantasy for society, is getting to a place where this is normalized and it's not shameful.
Totally. And is there such a thing as like a half and half pizza? Like, can you have your sex toy and also like maybe honor your partner's boundaries at the same time?
I think there's a middle ground. I think everything is negotiable. That's my philosophy when it comes to sex, is that everything is on the table until it's not. And a partner says, no, that's a red for me. It's not on the table, and we take it off the table. But if there's a way we could use a sex toy, like one of us wants to explore, but the other person can be present while I'm exploring with this, and I can talk to you about what I'm liking about this or what I'm not liking about this, and then maybe we can bring it in and we can do this together. I think there's all sorts of room to find a middle ground. It's all about negotiation and where our personal boundaries are.
Totally. That's how I feel about like red pepper flakes. I'm like, you can have it on your side of the pizza, but don't let it touch mine. Don't you dare let it touch mine. Evian, what did you want to share about how you like to recommend people kind of navigate this conversation?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that's personal to me because I'm someone that has thought for a long time that, you know, there's something sacred about having sex with a partner, that you don't bring the sex toys into play, that I should be able to achieve orgasm and have lots of pleasure without that. And, you know, some bodies just don't work that way. And also I have been trying to live with this new spectrum of thinking about pleasure within a sexual relationship, which is, if I can have even more pleasure in a sexual experience by adding a toy, if that might maybe take off some pressure that I feel to have an orgasm, or that my partner needs to give me an orgasm, like if there can be more ease within the sexual experience, I say, why not? You know, why not introduce something that is going to create an environment for pleasure to be at the center, and for there to be ease and playfulness within a sexual interaction? Because I think sometimes we take sex so seriously, and the idea of introducing a toy into your relationship dynamic can be a really great way to bring some playfulness, some fun, some laughter into the sexual experience. As well as explore the other means and methods of getting off with your partner. You know, there's different sensations that you can play with when it comes to a toy. There's different ways of being penetrated when you can play with a toy. There's different ways of, I don't know, I'm thinking of like edging, and like there's so many different potentials for pleasure that I don't think can be accessed if we're just doing it, you know, body to body, sliding around. So I like to just invite folks for them to see inviting a toy into their sexual dynamic as just another way to experience a new spectrum or a full spectrum of pleasure that maybe they weren't able to access or didn't think that they had available to them, but a toy can make that happen for them in a really like fun and playful way.
I love that you shared that, because I think that actually really hones in on what we end up saying to a lot of people that come into Lovers, which is ultimately a sex toy is not a replacement, right? we figured that out already. A sex toy is an aid. It's an enhancement. It's meant to do things that our bodies could never do. And that is the point, right? It's meant to kind of show you avenues of pleasure that you may not have had access to before. And so I think that's a really beautiful perspective to have about sex toys. And hopefully it helps some of the people here that are watching tonight feel a little bit more comfortable about the role that these toys play in the bedroom and for you personally. So I would love to kind of move back to our pizza analogy a little bit and talk about the partner that is not okay with bringing sex toys in. You've had these conversations, you've tried these techniques, and your partner is still not interested in using sex toys. There are still other ways that you can kind of explore your sexuality together without sex toys. Ultimately, we don't want to force anyone to do anything that makes them feel uncomfortable, right? So what are some of the ways that we can still experience some of the things that sex toys might bring us, those avenues to pleasure, without maybe bringing in those specific tools?
I was going to suggest breathing, breath work.
Yeah.
If people are feeling intimidated or shy or just repulsed by the idea of bringing in a toy, then they can just try to do other things that don't involve toys, but still can bring in that connection and that intimacy and pleasure potential. So breath work is really wonderful, syncing breaths together, breathing together, eye gazing, giving each other massages. I think that I think that this is all about being creative. And that's what I love about introducing or having sex toys in my own relationship, is that it gives us the opportunity to experiment, explore, and really define for us what we would like to have, or what sort of experience we would like to have when we're engaging in sex with each other with a little help. Anything can be a tool for sex if you have the intention set behind it. Let me take that back. I don't want anybody. That's not what I meant. I know cucumbers and carrots and stuff like that. Well, actually you could do that with a condom. Anyway, what I'm saying is tools in terms of not actual physical tools, but also, reading erotica to each other. That could be a tool for sexual exploration within your relationship. So there's lots of options out there that don't have to look like going to a sex shop and buying a toy, even though that's wonderful to do.
I mean, piggybacking on this idea of tools, I do think it's interesting where it feels like sex is the only area where we shame the idea of using tools. You're not shaming carpenters for not pounding hammers with their bare hands. You're not expected to chop a carrot without a knife. We have tools for a reason. It's why we have thumbs. That's the part of what sets us apart from, the reason our cats haven't taken over, right? We're able to use tools. But sex toys are put in sort of this completely other category of tool that is somehow its use is shamed. But another way also to get some of that benefit with maybe not bringing it into partnered sex is adding toys as tools to your solo explorations to learn more about what your body likes, to explore kinds of touch you maybe can't give yourself, and then taking that knowledge into your partnered sex. Because I used this toy, I explored, my prostate or, sort of G-spot area, or, now I know I enjoy this certain kind of pressure or touch. And then just taking that knowledge and that information into partnered play and having your partner, touch you in areas that, because some of those places you can't really reach on your own body. I don't know about y'all, but I am just not flexible enough to get into all the places with my bare hands. So
logistics are real.
Yeah. So toys sometimes are really necessary. And that's, doubly true if you have any mobility issues, if you have arthritis, anything at all going on, you're going to need some help. So using those tools to figure out what your body likes, and then letting your partner know, hey, I've discovered I maybe like this kind of touch. would you try that on me?
Thank you for bringing that up, Stella. I really wanted to make sure someone touched on kind of able-bodiedness in this, and tools are absolutely necessary for some people who are differently able. And it is not just a tool, but it's a necessity in some cases. That is certainly not a place of shame. It's a place of sexual liberation, because sometimes they're absolutely a necessity. Yeah, thank you for that.
Amazing. I think those are all. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna to also lean, into that, right? So I'm a person who has chronic pain, and so acknowledging that as we think about like introductions, there is something really vulnerable about saying like, hey, not just, oh, this is what I'm curious about, or this is what I want. Sometimes we're also saying like, this is actually what I need in order to participate or to stay present or to fully enjoy this experience, or to, have an opportunity to maximize my pleasure, right? And so sometimes it doesn't feel as optional. And so, yeah, I appreciate us naming that. And sometimes if we're having this conversation about like, oh, do I or don't I introduce sex toys, as we were talking about like creativity, we might just sort of expand our idea of like what introductions might look like, right? Then what do we think of when we think of as a tool versus a toy, right? Like, is there something that we could introduce that could still be fun, right? And it's a toy now, right? So, I have a wedge, right? And like, it's fun to not be in pain. So that counts as a toy, right? Even though it could be considered a mobility tool, but it also means that there's a whole bunch of angles that weren't going to happen otherwise. And I'm a decently flexible person, but there's no way that I'm going to sustain that position for however long. And so thinking about like, oh, we can also expand our conceptualization of what a toy is by thinking about what are tools that bring us pleasure, right? What are tools that we can play with? So maybe a candle now is considered part of our sex toy collection because I love the smell or I love the lighting that brings me pleasure and that feels good. And, that creates a scene that wouldn't happen otherwise. Maybe temperature play, maybe I have ice and now ice is a sex toy because we're using it as a tool for pleasure, right? That we can also kind of expand some of our ideas to then, I hope, destigmatize and sort of erase some of this delineation between like, this is arbitrary and therefore I can sort of default veto it versus like, oh, okay, let's think about all of the ways that we might already be using toys. Because if we're being barriered by mostly just like the attitude, I think it's different if it's like, I don't want that thing on my body, or that thing is, triggering or upsetting to me in a particular way. But if it's more about like, oh, you're not allowed to use toys, or toys make me feel not good about myself, or, I'm in competition with that thing, I think that we can, expand or shift some of our attitudes around that by kind of reframing the things we are already using. And that might allow us to then maybe feel more comfortable adding in more things that are only going to amplify our pleasure, as Evian was talking about earlier.
I think that's such a cool perspective to think of like really any item as a toy if it brings you pleasure. And I think all of these ideas were excellent, and it really does create an avenue that maybe if sex toys are not something that you're ready to explore right now, doesn't mean that down the line it won't be. And when you try and incorporate more of these activities like the massage, or like watching, pornography together, or, using a wedge or something simple like that, that maybe isn't mechanized, I think that these are pathways to becoming more comfortable with exploring those different types of tools. So let's say that this is a success. And I know it is because I've seen a couple couples actually just watching together tonight. So we know that they're on the path to success. What are the benefits of using sex toys with a partner? Like, why would somebody want to bring a sex toy into their bedroom or into their relationship?
I mean, because it's fun, more pleasure equals more fun. I'm someone that loves to like laugh and giggle when I'm having sex. Like I love bringing in that playful element to sex, because as I said before, I think we take sex so seriously. And so I think that bringing in a toy can help bring in that playful nature, that experimentation. You both can be sort of like novices together, and there can be grace about maybe you're not doing something right. I mean, there have been so many funny moments in my own sexual experiences where we're trying a toy and it just like comes out in a weird way, or like the battery dies and we're just like, this is hilarious. Like sex is so weird and fun at the same time. So I think that there can be even more potential for pleasure in bringing in a toy, as well as more fun and more opportunities to talk later about like, how was that for you? It can create a conversation that I think is really important.
I love what you're saying, Evian. I love that this is like about play, right? Like sex is the adult version of a playground. Like this is the place where we are allowed to be children and to be that curious person, to explore and to do all sorts of things that we may not have thought about before. And if we go to the playground and all we do is get on the swing and we swing and we swing and we swing and we swing and that's all we do, that could get kind of boring. And so there are other things on the playground. Go on a teeter totter, go join the jungle gym. You can do other things, whether that's a sex toy or a piece of ice or a feather. You know, that sex is not just about genital stimulation. It's about connecting with your human and your partner, your person that's sitting in front of you. It's about that experience. And so like I frequently tell people, go and be sexual with each other, but don't have sex. Don't have penetrative sex. You're not allowed this week, not allowed. Go and just have a sexual experience with each other where it's not about stimulation of the genitals. And it is about an exploration of playfulness and connection. And so I really love what you're talking about there, and I just wanted to reinforce that.
I think this is probably, you leave it to a room full of sexuality people to talk about swinging as boring.
I meant on a playground. I didn't mean like swingers swinging. That could be very fun.
So in real life, I am a pretty playful person. I like to laugh. I get away with like all kinds of stuff because I smile a lot. So even when I talk about like really difficult subjects, I'm often still smiling because that tends to be my disposition. But I'm also a very serious sex person. Sex tends to be a time where I'm there and I am sort of very in the moment. And so I want to name that out of acknowledgement that not everyone feels, you know, really fun and free and loose. And even for those of us who do, that just might not be the energy that you're trying to create in your sexual scenes. And so I invite people to also, in the same way that you would for any other lots of other kinds of play, maybe you try things out before you are in an experience, right? So my background is an athlete. I was a very, very competitive athlete. I'm still a very competitive person. I think, as an aside, I think competition just got a really bad rap. I don't know who's doing the PR for competition, but they're losing it, right? I think that one thing that for anyone who was really into any sort of like game or activity or is or was competitive or played any sort of sport, that a thing that we can bring in here is that like athletes are people who play seriously, right? Who seriously play. And so what do? You practice, you try things out, right? Kind of before you get into the game. And so if you are trying a new position, if you're trying a new toy, I really invite you, if it doesn't feel right, to sort of have the awkwardness happen kind of while you are on the field, right? To try it out off, right? To try that angle, right? Clothes on, no stakes, right? Like to try that toy and like see if the battery is charged, to, sort of put it in different places around your body. Again, it's not necessarily a sexy or sexual experience. We are just exploring it and figuring it out so that we feel maybe a little bit more equipped, prepared, sort of ready for whenever it's time for us to kind of be in. And that can sort of lessen the pressure of us having to figure it out in real time or interrupt a moment if you don't bounce back quickly or easily, or it doesn't feel so fun, or you're just, not really in the space where it can be a little bit more lighthearted as you're engaging. And I think that's especially true. Let me just say really quickly, I think that's especially true for if our play has risk in it, right? So when we're thinking about things like kink, which can absolutely involve all kinds of like toys and apparatuses, I absolutely strongly encourage you to not just sort of try it out in real time, just sort of as you go and kind of see what happens. I really strongly encourage folks to, take some time where they are present and grounded and centered and really paying attention so that they can ask the questions and figure things out beforehand so that you can feel a little bit more free and less vigilant when you're playing.
I'd love to sort of piggyback on a couple of the things that were said, sort of to Ty's point. I think one of the best things we can do for a relationship is to keep introducing novelty. And that can be anything. That can be, trying a new kind of food. But in this context, it can be, introducing a sex toy, because that completely changes up the kind of sex that you're having. And that is something that people need, especially in long-term relationships. You need to keep changing things up, trying new things. And so that's a great way to do that. And also to piggyback on Evian's point about learning new things together. I mean, that's a really great way to level the playing field, because especially with sex, we have so much ego tied up in, we're like supposed to know how to do it already. And so if you take something that you couldn't possibly know, I often use rope bondage as an example for this, right? Because you have no reason to just magically already know how to do that. And so getting a book, going to a class, getting a video, and fiddling with knots in a way that, like you said, it's going to be silly. You're going to get it wrong. You're going to have to giggle about it. And it requires so much focus that you're focused on a project together. You're focused together. And it levels the playing field. So that's another thing I think toys can be really useful for, is a way to learn a new skill together. And again, that works for relationships in general. I mean, you could put together a puzzle together, and it has, some of the same things happen there, but in the sexual realm, that leveled playing field where you can learn a new skill together can be really valuable.
I love that you talked about focus here, because I feel like one of the things that, reasons that people will come into the store and they'll want to try and experiment with a sex toy is they'll say, I need a little something extra. I have a little bit of difficulty getting there all the time, and I need just a little extra support. And so I think that one thing that a sex toy does is it helps couples to improve focus so that they can actually, pay attention to each other and not on other things that are going on, or what's for dinner, or did I lock the door, or anything like that that might be interrupting your thoughts when you should be really focused on your partner. So I think that that's a really cool point that you brought up as talking about other ways you can bring focus into your relationship. So being a toy the first time, we talked a little bit about going into a sex toy store and shopping together can be really beneficial for learning a little bit more about what you and your partner might be interested in trying. It can be a little bit awkward sometimes. I think sometimes our eyes are a little bit bigger than however that saying goes, our eyes are bigger than our whatever. We'll get something, we'll get a device, and then we try and use it, and it doesn't go maybe as seamlessly as we were hoping, right? Because it's new. So when you're using a new toy, how can we navigate with our partner to ensure that we have a positive experience, knowing that it's something that might kind of produce its own challenges along the
way? I think that it's important to remember that none of us are born with an inherent skill in all things, including sex. And even if we have gotten compliments from previous lovers, that doesn't mean that was what this partner wants or likes. And so I frequently talk about Dan Savage's 3 Gs of good, giving, and game. And to be good at anything, forget sex for a second, to be good at anything, it takes a lot of practice and a lot of coaching. We need feedback in order to know what this human likes or dislikes. And so one of the ways that I have my clients work on this is just kind of giving feedback is to exchange hand massages. and have your partner give you a hand massage. Close your eyes and guide your partner to give you the perfect hand massage. Lighter here, now pull here, strength, stronger here, no, lighter there, lighter, lighter, you know, and be really clear about how you like your hand massage, and take that same precision in your language and generalize that to sex. If it's oral sex or it's using a toy, or that may be a little awkward, to use that same type of language around what you like and what you don't like. And it's a way that really helps clients kind of get out of their head about it, about needing to do it perfectly, because it's not gonna be perfect. You're gonna bumble, it's gonna be silly, you're gonna laugh at each other. No one has the expectation that you're gonna be perfect at this other than maybe yourself. So give yourself the space to be a learner in this, and let your partner be the expert in their own body.
I think toy choice can be really important too, especially for people who are not already very sex toy savvy. Reading reviews online first is great. Going to a sex toy store with savvy employees that you can talk to. I know that talking to a complete stranger about what you're going to put on your genitals might sound terrifying, but you know, this is what people's jobs are, and they're very good at it. But going in knowing what kind of sensation generally you like, and getting a toy that is conducive to that, rather than something that is completely brand new to you. Because I hear a lot of like sex toy regrets sometimes from clients. You know, a new client will say, oh, I bought this thing and it's not, and it's something, you know, it's got like 5 different arms and it blinking in it. I'm just like, oh gosh, you know, that maybe is not a beginner toy. You know, maybe you needed something, you know, that fits, you know, the contour of the palm of your hand so that it augments the way you're already touching yourself, or something that is going to fit into the kind of sensation, you know, you like, the kind of sensation you're having already, and sort of starting there and then leveling up to more advanced or more, you know, wild sex toys. Yeah, so having an idea of like, well, do you know what kind of touch you like? Do you know what kind of pressure you like? And getting a toy that's going to help you with that. And again, folks who work at sex toy stores, you can tell them like, I really like a deep sensation on this part of me, and they will have 5 suggestions. So consulting the experts is always really helpful.
Yeah.
Love that. Yeah, go ahead, Shadeen.
I think also some of what is also coming up here is about like just even our attitude around this process, right? That, you know, I absolutely, want to amplify what was already said in terms of like doing our research, and asking for, you know, expert advice and reading reviews. But for a lot of things, you're not really gonna know until you experience it. Even if you're like, oh yeah, I really like a rumble, that doesn't mean that you're gonna like this toy's particular rumble. And maybe you're stepping out of your comfort zone. Maybe you're not necessarily a beginner, but you're just trying something different than what you already have, because as we talked about, novelty can be really cool and really exciting. And so I think that we, you know, whenever we are sort of going on an adventure, we just sort of run the risk of being like, oh, that wasn't what I thought it was going to be. And like, how do we like normalize that as like a very real experience that we can't always prevent against, in the same way that you like go to a new restaurant, or you go to your exact same restaurant and you sit somewhere different, or you order the same thing you order every single time and it's just a little off. Like that can just happen. That can just happen. So yes, you can do everything you can to be equipped, to be prepared, to be informed. And sometimes for one reason or another, the stars don't align. Maybe it's a little bit more sort of specific than that. Like you got the extra large and you needed the medium, right? But like just acknowledging that like, oh, okay, like what did I learn also from this experience, right? Maybe I now know that I like cilantro on the side, but not on top. Maybe I know that I like this in the morning, but not in the afternoon. Maybe I am a rumble rather than a buzz. Maybe I like something that plugs in rather than has battery. Like there is likely something that you learned from it. And so how do we also allow ourselves to continue to move forward, even when we have maybe a less than, you know, sort of fireworks inducing experience, how do we also honor the fact that like sometimes we're going to be a little disappointed and not let that discourage us from continuing to be open to exploration and pleasure and play?
That's a great question. And I would love to hear everybody's kind of opinions on that. Like, how do you do that? How do you prevent yourself from feeling, put off by having that not explosive experience or something that doesn't quite align with what you thought?
I think not taking it personally, or rather not internalizing it as there's something wrong with you or that you did something wrong or bad. I think we're also concerned with being made to look like, or being embarrassed, or being made to look like we don't know what we're doing. So I think that being able to just like lower our expectations in terms of like, it's okay for us to be messy. It's okay for us to make mistakes. It's okay for us to have not so good experiences. That's life. And I think that if there's any arena of our lives that we should give ourselves lots of space and grace to play and explore and become better people is within the sexual realm. So I think that, I mean, obviously it's a lot easier to say this than it is to do it, because if we have internalized that we have to be on point and we have to know all of the things, and that my sexual performance has to be 100% every single time, and every decision I make about sex has to be perfect. I mean, yeah, it's a lot to have to dismantle those belief systems that you have. But I think that it starts by just giving yourself permission in other aspects of your life to be messy, and in other aspects of your life to say like, it's okay if I don't know all the things, or it's okay if I thought that this was going to be a good idea and we're doing it and now it's not a good idea. That's life. That's human. And I'm allowed to be complex. I'm allowed to have to create mistakes and not know everything. Yeah.
And with the, using that restaurant example, I would also say it's important not to generalize. If you go to a restaurant and have a bad experience, you're probably not going to say, I guess all restaurants are bad, I'm never going to go out to eat again. So if you have a bad experience with a sex toy, it doesn't mean all sex toys are bad and sex toys just aren't for you. It just, again, it means that one. But when it comes to sex, I see that generalization in a way that I don't see in other aspects of people's life. So yeah, it's okay to have a disappointment and then try again. That's actually a pretty important life skill.
I also think that like sometimes if it's not that great experience the first time, it's a learning curve for new toys, right? We have to learn those products and how they work with our body. So don't be, put off by the idea that that first time that you used it maybe wasn't everything that you thought it would be. Maybe it's about learning how to use the controls better, learning the angle better for your body, really figuring out how it works for you. Maybe you got a rabbit vibrator and you found out that it works way better for you externally. So, there, like Stella had said earlier, there is no right way to use a toy unless it's an anal toy. So, and Ty, what did you have to add to that?
Well, I was just gonna say, I really like what everyone was saying about in terms of expectations. I think so much of this is about setting broad expectations and giving yourself the experience. Like we're getting a new toy, and the only expectation I have is that we're gonna have a new toy and we're gonna play with it and see what happens, right? Setting really broad expectations. And then the other piece of just what you were just saying is a lot of this is trial and error. It goes back to getting good at anything. It's going to take some practice and trying some things out and try it out and see if it goes well. And if it doesn't, we try it slightly different. And we could try it 1,000 ways. And maybe then after 1,000 times, we can say, this toy isn't my toy, right? And that's okay, because there's thousands of others that we can try then do something different. So yeah.
Awesome. One of the things that we were talking about with this question, Stella, you had brought up, maybe it's not a beginner toy, right? So we're talking about introducing sex toys. We should probably talk a little bit about what a beginner toy looks like, right? What are your options here if this is something that you're ready to explore? Do you guys have any suggestions for what you feel are a good place to start when it comes to like vibrators or sex toys or things like that?
I think it can be helpful to start with something that does not look like any actual human anatomy. That can be intimidating for some folks. So things that are sort of shaped a little more, a little bit of a space age shape and non-human colors, like a blue boomerang or something might end up being less intimidating than something that is meant to be phallic. So sometimes that's sort of one way to help folks ease into it in a way that's not as intimidating. And you had also mentioned before sort of the eyes being bigger than the whatever. I hear that a lot of times, especially people picking out anal toys. They come home with a thing. I'm like, oh, that looks like an average size. And then you actually try to put it where it's intended, and no, that's not going to work. So also start small. It's easier to size up. If you get something too big for your body, it's just a paperweight at that point. So start small, and work your way up.
Yeah, I really appreciate the framing of starting small. And I personally, when I work with folks, don't often make like specific recommendations, only because like, even as I get to know people really, really well, like I can't make any product guarantees. But in thinking about like the things that make you go, ooh, I'm curious, or I'm interested, right? That pulling off of that thread that Stella just named about like starting small. Okay, like what is sort of the first step into that, right? Like what is the smallest, most reasonable step I can take in that direction before I go out and make like the full big $350 carrying case edition investment? Like what's like the first sort of reasonable step? And that's a good place to ask, an expert, a professional, right? To ask someone who works somewhere that you might purchase from. If you're online, a lot of places have like a live and in real time chat. A lot of places you can actually contact people. If there's somewhere that you can go in person, I really like to invite people where it is possible and safe, and if you feel comfortable enough to go in store, because you can see things can look different online. Right. And I really like that, Lovers puts like, measurement information, like keep keep a ruler or measuring tape nearby, like actually see what that is actually going to look like, because that thing that like many objects are larger than they appear and others are much smaller than they appear, right? And so you don't really have we don't have a good way of judging scale when it's just like this neat clean background, or like several graphically designed flowers, right? I have no idea what that's going to look like in proportion to, like, is that the size of my kneecap, or is that the size of my whole face, right? And so being able to think of first, what makes me go, ooh, what feels exciting, inspiring, arousing, of curiosity to me? What's the smallest step I can make in that direction? Who can I sort of consult with if I'm not sure, about how I start something like that? And then also thinking about like, oh, how do I engage with that? If I can't go in store to like touch it and manipulate it and like see if I feel good about this, can I at least sort of do a little bit of online sleuthing and measuring or review watching, just to kind of, again, get a sense of, does that still feel like where I want to start?
I think that I love that you mentioned that with the size thing, because it's true not just of size, but also of material. I remember one of my first vibrator purchases, it was a nice one, it was from Lalo. And it was hard as a rock, and just, not what I was intending to buy. And I think that really goes to show how beneficial it can be to go into a sex toy store, regardless of whether it feels comfortable or not to begin with. These people are here to support you, and they have a wealth of knowledge, and they heard just about everything in the book. I mean, I used to get phone calls every day about what types of animals that we had in stock. So, I mean, like, we've really heard it all. So there's nothing you could do that's going to throw us off by any means if you come into one of our locations. I don't know about if you guys feel comfortable sharing this, but where did you guys kind of start when you first had a sex toy? I know that I started with a Hitachi magic wand, which for some people, they might not consider that a beginner toy because it's quite powerful, but it's also very easy to operate. It doesn't have to go anywhere inside, you know, it stays outside. So I did think that I was pretty happy with that being my first toy. I was pretty pleased. Where did you guys start when you first kind of dipped your toes into the sex toy world?
My first sex toy purchase, I snuck across the street from the mall to, there's always a sex toy shop conveniently placed next to like the local, like the local mall. So snuck over there at the end of probably a movie or like an Ardennes shop or something, and got a battery powered lipstick vibrator because it was inconspicuous, right? So to the point of like blue boomerang, this, you know, wasn't, you know, particularly phallic, wasn't particularly obvious. I was still in high school, still living with my very traditional Caribbean parents. You know, bedroom door does not have a lock, right? Like, you know, all of the things, you know, and so that felt like an empowering small step for me to explore a sensation that I could not create for myself, right? Using a thing that wasn't super obvious, wasn't super dramatic, was portable, was easy to hide because that was important to me at the time. And that, I mean, was not a big investment, right? It was enough for me to afford on a fast food worker salary. And that was a meaningful entry point for me to have a sense of like, oh, okay, like, what does it mean for me to take agency over what sensations I have on my body?
Very cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people that are listening tonight are going to very soon be having similar experiences, and I hope that excites them to hear how empowering it was for you. Does anybody else have any experiences they want to share?
The first sex toy store I went into was Camouflage in Santa Cruz. I went to college at UC Santa Cruz, and there was the sex toy store on, like, the downtown was one street, but there was like lingerie in front and sex toys in the back. And I remember it felt like I was nervous walking in there. I'm like, oh, people are going to see me go in. Like, I'm just looking at lingerie. Don't mind me. But mine was also sort of bullet vibe style, but it was about 6 inches. It was hard plastic, leopard print, battery powered.
I think we saw that.
Yeah, I mean, it's a classic for a reason, but you know what? Like, it got the job done. It got me all the way through college. Like, you know, you mentioned the magic wand. Like, now the magic wand like has pride of place on my nightstand. It's the only sex toy that lives on my nightstand. So I do think that is an improvement. But you know what? That leopard print toy, we had some good times.
Love.
There's a reason the magic wand is like the best-selling sex toy ever.
It's been around for a long time.
My first sex toy was also a bullet vibe. It was battery operated. I think I got it from Spencer's. I don't know if y'all are familiar with Spencer's, but it was a shop in malls where, you know, you could buy gag gifts, and yeah, that was my first toy. It had a cord attached to it, and it died actually very shortly after I got it. I was pretty disappointed, but I mean, what can you expect? I think it was like $10 or something like that. And that was a really interesting experience for me. I'd never had vibration before. I'd used toys like internally, but I'd never had a vibrator. And so from there, I think I want to say that like buying a cheap toy can be a really great gateway into figuring out, okay, I do like vibration. And now I'm going to upgrade to something that's a little bit better quality, something that isn't battery operated, something that maybe costs $50, $60, $100. And I'm grateful that I had sort of that learning period to figure out, yes, I do like vibration. This little bullet that could made me realize that. And now I'm gonna, spend a little bit more and get something that will last a lot longer. So yeah.
You guys kind of heard it here. Like, we've got a lot of bullets being like a first time toy. I think it's safe to say that that's a great place to start with your journey. Is there any like toys that you guys can think of that you had tried since then and were like, this would have been a fine place to start? Maybe looked more intimidating, but this would have been fine. That's how I felt about the magic wand. I was like, this is fine. I'm good here. I'm set.
I've definitely told people like what was just said, like use the $5 to $20 vibe to find out if you even like vibration at all before you get, the $100 or $200 vibrator. That said, I if you like vibration, I know people are scared of wand style toys because they are so large, but that would be maybe a place where I would encourage folks, if they know they like vibration, don't be frightened of the size. And in fact, we were talking about accommodation earlier. That's one of the things that's so great about the magic wand or other wand style toys, is because of the length of the wand. It is easier for a lot of people to reach. It's easier to add it to partnered sex in a lot of different positions because you can sort of get it in the right place. Your partner can hold it. It can sort of slide in between bodies more easily. And because of the heavy vibration, I've heard people even just like clenching their legs around it. So if you don't want to keep your hands involved, so that can be a good toy. And another one that I definitely think looks very intimidating, but is in fact can be a good beginner toy is, I often recommend the Enjoy Pure Wand. I end up demoing those in a lot of my classes. Back in the day when we all used to get in a room together, I would sometimes do live demo classes. And I know that the stainless steel toys can look terrifying, but the Pure Wand, it does have the small end and the big end. And it's just super great for folks regardless of your gender or genitals, really useful for folks who want to explore internal stimulation. So I do find myself recommending that, even though it looks a little scary. If you like internal stimulation, that can be a good one to go with.
And we just, we expanded and just brought in a bunch of stainless steel levers for the first time. So if you're curious about that wand that Stella was talking about, relationship 20 is the code, you guys, don't forget. Evian, you had something that you were going to share.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, lube is also a sex toy, and that's something that I wish that I would have incorporated a lot sooner. And now that I use lube, I'm like, why would I ever have sex again without it? So yeah, I mean, we're talking about vibrators, we're talking about dildos and insertables, but you could always start with a lube, and have that be your first sex toy and explore what it feels like to have more of a slippery sensation, which, I mean, I don't know why we don't talk about lube enough, but like, lube is amazing. It's amazing.
Very cool. Somebody asked in the chat, is air pulsation considered to be like a good beginner style toy? So, and when we talk about air pulsation, we're talking about things like the womanizer and the In Your Rose that's gone all over TikTok and tools like that. What do you guys think?
I think it absolutely can be, right? Like, again, for me, my bias is I can't necessarily tell someone what is or isn't, approachable for them. But we have definitely seen that, especially for people who have clitorises, that, yeah, I mean, a lot of folks, especially over the course of the pandemic, had their first experience with, an airflow toy, an air pulsation toy, and are writing like reviews that go viral And so, yeah, that can be really great. And it can even be used on other parts of the body, for example, like nipples that can have really, sensitive skin. So we might get creative. And, your earlier question was, what are the ways that like, in our own development that we were like, oh, I could have tried this. And I think, at least for me, it was even thinking about just different materials. Right. So I think for those of us who named, our starter toys, it sounds like they were all like plastic battery powered, bullets. Right. And like that was kind of what I knew toys were, other than like big monstrous dildos. And like if big monstrous dildos are your style, like totally cool. I was staying at my, religious parents' house. And so like there was no way I was going to be able to bring a big monstrous dildo into a place where like you don't have a lock on your room door. But definitely over time, being able to even just get curious about like, what do different like materials and textures feel like? And being sort of pleasantly surprised by what sort of firmness is or hardness is, or just sort of like ribbed or not ribbed, or grooved or not grooved, like allowing myself to be curious. I think that I am, especially when we talk about like novelty, I find myself sort of constantly like, oh, oh, oh. Sometimes it's kind of like, oh, right. But, allowing myself to be, really curious. And so starting with like, hard, cold plastic, and realizing like, oh, I really like soft, supple, like rich silicone, something that is like bendy, like the Dame Palm, for example, or I really like this thing that is really like cool and hard, like the Chakrubs crystal, or like just being able to like, I think for a lot of us, if you allow yourself to try something, that you just might be pleasantly surprised, right? That most things are less scary than we have made them out to be, once we allow ourselves a safe container to explore on our own terms. I think that we can find that like, oh, okay, maybe this is kind of okay, right? Or even if it's not really for me, it didn't, it didn't do maybe the worst thing that I was worried about.
Tying in Shadeen with Evian's comments about variety as well as lube, not all lubes are created equal, right? And that too is a trial and error, both with specific toys or specific acts. You may like a water-based for digital play, or you might like silicone for actual insertables. Of course, be careful with some silicone and some insertables because it breaks down the silicone or the material of the toy. So just be careful with that. But condoms help with that too. So playing with the types of lube that you use is just as important as the types of toy.
Absolutely. And I think, Shadeen, you were completely correct about trying different types of materials. I think, maybe at the time that you guys were all trying these beginner bullets and vibes that were those hard plastics, that's what was available on the market at the time. And toys have changed so much.
Come a long way in 20 years.
So innovative. We have a stroker now that you can program your own freaking universe into it. I swear to God, like it's pretty incredible. So I mean, there's a lot out there to try and to explore. And I think, going into a store and seeing it and holding it and feeling it for yourself is going to be the best thing that you can do for making sure that you get, as close to a right guess on the first try. We have one more question. Somebody was wondering if the Chorus by Revive is a good starter toy. I know how I feel about this one. I'm sure you guys are going to say something similar. So I'm going to give the floor to you. Shadeen, your face right now. Do you want to take this? Chorus by Revive?
I totally could. I think that it can absolutely be accessible because it is, I think, a toy that can be really versatile, right? So for anyone who hasn't sort of seen it, it's sort of a, C shape, and it's got sort of a head that has kind of a curve and a dome that in the way that it is often demonstrated. This bottom piece, oh, I think we're going to get a live demo here, right? So this sort of bottom part is more narrow. Thank you, right? And we have our lovely Rain Vena to show you. So it has a flexible arm. This bottom base is often the piece that you're encouraged to insert, right, into a vaginal canal. That larger head is designed to rest on top of the clitoris, right? So that is right. And so it sort of sits and nests, is there out of the way, right? But also in the right places, right? Both heads vibrate. So that top part and bottom part vibrate. So you get sort of a combination of sensations. You can control them separately. So it is versatile in those ways. I know that's the way it is sort of marketed, but I also like that you can still sort of play and explore. So the same way that Rain had it wrapped around her hand, right? That you can use that and explore your body with vibrations and sensations. You don't have to insert it anywhere, right? That it can just be something that you use on the outside or just on the inside, right? And so, yeah, I think that for whatever that you're using, if both of you feel comfortable exploring with it and allowing yourselves to be a little bit creative, you know, I think that, yeah, if it feels like a good enough place to start, I would say go ahead. But I'm also curious, you know, what anyone else would add or say, even if it's don't.
I love that perspective because my gut reaction was don't. I personally don't think this is a beginner toy. You back me, Evan?
Yeah, I actually, the first toy that I used in a couple sexual experience was one of those. And I was like really frustrated. It did not stay in place. And I think we used it like once and I ended up just like putting it in the closet. So, and like never used it again. I think it's a little advanced. I think if I had it now, I would probably know a little bit more what to do with it. But at the time I was like, I don't even know how to do it. So I don't know. I mean, I'm of the mind that if it's something is like really curious to you and it's making you like, oh, I think this would be fun. Like I'm intrigued. I would love to try it. I will say that I got it as a prize. Like I didn't actually want it. Someone was like, oh, you won this raffle and you get it. So if there's someone that is like, I'm really interested in trying this toy, I like the way that it works, I can see the different ways that we can use it, I say go for it. But just because it is a toy that is designed for couples doesn't mean that that is something that you should incorporate into your sex life. So there are many different toys that you can use that don't necessarily or aren't marketed for couples, but can be used anyway. Yeah.
Totally.
It ties into sort of the rant I alluded to earlier about things marketed as couples toy. I also ended up with one of these for free and I'm not a huge fan. I found it just sort of pokey and annoying. And we also, I think, tossed it across the room before too long. I liked your suggestion. Like if you're willing to get creative with it and have your hands involved, that's great. The piece I would be very skeptical about, and that holds true for anything marketed as a couple's toy, anything that tells you it's hands-free and is just gonna like hang out on your genitals and magically work, I would be very skeptical of that. If you are willing to incorporate your hands while you're using this toy, I think you'll have a better outcome. I think part of the marketing of these toys kind of plays into maybe some of the shame pieces that Shadeen was talking about, because I think that they're like, oh, you just sort of put it there and then you can forget that you're using a sex toy. It's totally unobtrusive. Then you just have partnered sex and magical orgasms and oh, no toys here. And I don't think that that's realistic or necessarily a good way to look at it. I think if you want it to be in just the right spot, you're going to have to use your hands. You're going to have to adjust it. You're going to need to acknowledge that it's there, which is fine, right? We've covered this. That's not a failure. It's fine to use your hands. It's fine to use toys and any of these things. And there are dozens and dozens, if not hundreds of these toys that you're supposed to be able to sort of set and forget. There's the other one, I don't remember the name of it, but they advertise it like with the little beaver that's just supposed to like hang out in your labia. I'm like, have you met labia? Like that is not No, but like if you like it and you love it and you're okay to have your hand there, then by all means. But yeah, or even like the like double-ended dildo strap-on style, they're like no harness needed. I'm like, really? Because speaking of lube and all of that, like what's gonna win? Like this heavy toy or a very wet place that you're putting it. So yeah, especially for beginner toys, I think it is dangerous to assume it's going to be hands off and it's a set it and forget it, because I think that will lead to disappointment. But if you love it and you're willing to use your hands and drive it a little bit more intentionally, then by all means.
I do want to
I
plug
had
this toy
heard this
slightly.
when I got the toy the first time. I'm like, seriously, I think I got this toy like maybe 14 years ago. And I had it from that mindset of like, oh, you set it and forget it. We're just gonna have sex and it's gonna be a perfect time. But it kept moving around, and I was like, this is not the point. And I couldn't figure out how to turn it off, and it was just really clumsy and clunky. So yeah, I appreciate all of this. My younger self is like, oh yeah, we should have talked about this a little more.
I will say that it is that toy can be helpful with for men and prostate play. That it simulates the internal and the external of the prostate, and so you're going to get a double simulation in that way. But again, not necessarily a hands-free sort of experience there. But yeah, it's a versatile toy for both genders.
Yeah, I think we've got like a 50-50, like, yes, go for it. And then the other half's like, maybe not. I think that, Stella and Evian said this perfectly. It is a toy that requires you to be hands-on, requires you to be game for creativity. And as you can see from me kind of playing with it, there's so many ways that you can use it to stimulate the body that go beyond how it's advertised. So I think it is an incredible toy. I think that it is a beginner toy. I think beginner toys are designed to let you kind of figure things out on your own. And this is designed for you to figure it out, okay? So before we wrap up tonight's workshop, I wanna see, do you guys have any like parting advice or anything that you feel, you wanted to kind of get into this conversation before we close for the night?
Yeah, I would just re-highlight how, personal all of this can be for folks. And so I think that, even this last conversation is a perfect example that I think that, all of us said varying sort of degrees of maybe, right? Like maybe yes and maybe not yes, right? To leave everyone room for whatever, their experience can be. And so as you're doing this exploration and as you're hearing people sort of rant and rave, to just acknowledge that we have different bodies, we have different levels of experience and different levels of comfort and different triggers and different things that are, that are painful for us and different things that are exciting for us, right? And so for us to hear other people's experiences and listen for some of like the key signals of the things that you're looking for, but to be willing to keep, curiosity at the forefront, to keep self-compassion and grace at the forefront, to allow yourself to like what you actually like and to dislike what you actually dislike, even if it is everyone's absolute favorite thing or nobody else's favorite thing that right? That it is okay for you to enjoy what you enjoy as long as it's not causing anyone harm, right? So if you can give yourself permission to center pleasure, and when you're inviting people into that with you to really care about their pleasure, right, then I think it gives you a lot of room to be creative and to be really honest with what works for my body and what works, if this is a joint experience, what works for us together.
That's beautiful. Did anybody else have anything they wanted to leave our guest with tonight?
I think one of the things that's probably more important than what toy you choose, more important than what lube you use, is the communication between you and your partner and the connection that you have with your partner. And if something is off the table, it's off the table. And I say frequently, like the most important related thing in a healthy relationship around anything is creating an atmosphere between the two of you, or the many of you, however, wherever your relationship structure is, that we can talk about anything, and I feel safe with my partner to talk about what I like, what I don't like, to talk about anything, and that's not going to be thrown back at me. This is not shameful. It is non-judgmental, that we're able to support each other in exploring life together. And I think that that's more important, honestly, than the toy. So as long as you have that communication, I think you're going to play well with each other.
Yeah, I was going to add that, like, it's important to, before you even think about looking at buying a toy, to just have that conversation, like bring up some curiosity, like, hey, what do you think about incorporating sex toys into our relationship or into our sex life? Like, and if we did, hypothetically, what would you like? What would you like to explore? I think that creating that conversation first is a really important step. And as Stella had said in the beginning, when you have that conversation, then you can go to a sex toy shop together and make this experience a joint experience of finding what you like and trying different things and figuring out what sort of toy you would like to purchase together. And that way, incorporating this toy will feel like a joint, I don't know, I was about to say expedition, but sure, a joint expedition, a joint adventure, where like you're both, invested in, and whatever happens, it's like, okay, cool, we tried it together, it worked or it didn't work, and let's see how we can continue to explore. So yeah, I love what you said, Ty, about communication, because it's so important.
That piece about just being open to whatever happens is so important too. Having it be play, having it be exploration. And this is sort of one of those places where we can use language to our benefit. Like maybe the first time you try a new toy, don't even call it sex, or don't incorporate it into the normal, whatever your day-to-day sex is. Have it be like, this is exploration, this is playtime. We're just sort of seeing what this thing does, and we're being playful. And it can help to do that at a different time in a different place. If you have the luxury of privacy, maybe it's in the living room in the middle of the day instead of the bedroom at night. And it's just like, let's just try this thing. Let's see how it fits on our bodies. Let's see what sensations it provides. Because as soon as you call something sex, that comes with expectations. It can come with goals. So removing as many of the goals as possible. Like the first time we figure this thing out, it is not about mind-blowing mutual orgasms. It's just like, can we figure out what all the buttons do? And that's maybe the first time. And so the play and exploration is the point, for the first time, maybe the first few times.
I think you guys just did a great job of summarizing everything that we kind of touched on tonight. And I hope that you guys all feel, excited to take this journey now with your partner, whenever that is, whenever is right. I know that you guys are also interested in knowing who's going to be winning $300 worth of sex toys. And that person is Kana. Hey, Kana, congratulations, Kana. Our events manager, Dana, is going to be reaching out to you via the chat, and she's going to get your information so that way we can get your goodies to you. So definitely join us for our next workshop. In a couple of weeks, we're going to be discussing how to travel with sex toys. It's going to be a lot of fun, and it's free, as is every event that we do at Lovers. Thank you guys for joining tonight. Thank you to all our panelists. You guys are incredible. As usual, we cannot wait to have you back. Thank you guys.
It was such a good conversation.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you guys. Thank you.